So today we're going to talk about 2 distress tolerance skills. We're going to start with distracting. Distracting methods work by reducing contact with the stressor or its most painful aspects. When you're in a crisis situation, distraction can help you avoid dangerous behaviors, but it can also be overly used. So as a caveat, we don't want to use distraction as a way to avoid a problem that needs to be solved. There are some effective ways to use distraction. And the 2 ways are, the first is when emotional pain threatens to become too overwhelming. So when your emotional pain or you're just being upset becomes so great that you're in danger of being overwhelmed by it, maybe at work, at school, or at meetings, when you're trying to parent, it may be more effective to distract yourself from the feelings in the moment instead of fully experiencing them. Distraction may also be effective when problems can't be solved immediately, right in that moment. So you could use it when you have a problem that you can't solve right then. An urgency to solve the problem right then is making it very difficult to focus on anything except the crisis. So how do we distract, right? So a way to think of it is that wise mind accepts. So what does that mean? There's different things you can do to help distract yourself. So one of them would be through activities. So engaging in activities that are maybe neutral or opposite to negative emotions and crisis behaviors can work to reduce impulsive urges and distress in a number of ways. So they can distract attention and fill short-term memory with non-crisis oriented thoughts, images, or sensations. They can also affect physiological responses and emotional expressive behaviors directly. Activities can reduce the emotional pain that often drives those crisis behaviors. So treatments that focus on behavioral activation or making yourself engage in pleasurable activities can be really effective at reducing things like low mood or depression. Some activities you might do would be get on the computer, go exercise, spend time with your children, play cards, build something. The next one is C, is for contributing. So you could do lots of things to contribute, like to somebody else's well-being, to refocus attention maybe from yourself and shift it to others and what you could do for them. Participate fully in the experience of helping someone else can make you really kind of completely forget about your own problems for a moment. For some, it can also increase a sense of meaning in your life and therefore improve the moment. It can also improve your sense of self-respect. So maybe that's finding volunteer work to do, helping out a family friend, or surprising someone with something nice in the moment. Maybe just calling someone in that moment and saying something encouraging or just to say hi. The next C is for comparison. So making comparisons can refocus your attention from yourself to others, but kind of in a different way. So in this case, the situation of others, those coping in the same way or less well, or the less fortunate in general, can be used to recast your own situation in a more positive light. Alternatively, you could focus on past problems that are no longer occurring and compare the present moment to that difficult time. So some things you could do is think about a time when you felt differently. Think about people coping the same ways you or less well than you. You could watch something about other people's troubles. Maybe that's through TV. Maybe you could read about a story where maybe someone else is just kind of worse off than you. E stands for emotion. So you can generate different emotions to distract from your current situation or whatever current negative emotion you might be experiencing. So that's interfering with that current mood state you're in. This technique, though, does require first figuring out your current emotion, so identifying what it is, so that you can then generate activities for a different emotion. So maybe you read a book that you know is going to elicit a different emotion, like maybe a thriller. And after you put the book down, think back to the story and re-experience that emotion. You don't want to read anything that's going to make you feel worse than you already feel, or that could cue crisis behaviors. So reading emotional things, maybe watching something emotional, music can often elicit different emotions. listening to jokes, funny things, sometimes religious stuff, just eliciting a different emotion. P stands for pushing away. So pushing away from a painful situation can be done by leaving it physically or by blocking it from your mind. Leaving that situation just decreases contact with whatever was that stressor or emotional cue. Blocking is a somewhat conscious effort where you're trying to like inhibit or stop the thoughts, images, or urges associated with negative emotions. So a form of blocking could be to continuously and repeatedly put off destructive behaviors for a brief period of time. It can kind of be like riding a bike when you try to block, in that you only understand it when you do it. Most people can do it and usually know what you mean as soon as you try it. So, for example, you could build up an imaginary wall between yourself and others. You could put your emotions in a box and put that box on the shelf. So do some visualization techniques. Or you could actually make a physical worry box and drop pieces of paper in it with labels of like your stressors. You could put off smoking a cigarette every 5 minutes for 5 more minutes. So just doing things to push stuff away. So that again could be mentally or physically leaving the situation, kind of denying it, putting the emotions or pain in either a mental box or a physical box. T stands for thought. So distract yourself with other thoughts to fill that short-term memory so that the thoughts that were activated by the negative emotion don't continue to reactivate that emotion. So it could be things like singing a song in your head, or something common is you might have been to a funeral before and you feel that at any minute you might just burst out sobbing and you really don't want to. Maybe distract yourself by counting something at the funeral, like bricks on the wall. If you're in a church, like people in the pews, or words that are said by the speakers. You can also do puzzles. You could watch TV or read just to push those thoughts and change them. And then the last one is S is for sensation. So intense, different sensations can focus your attention on something else other than that current emotional distress, its source, or its crisis urges. So like we discussed with the tip skills, like holding ice cubes can be very helpful. It just to, again, reroute those sensations. You could go out like in the rain or the snow if the weather's permitting, right? Taking a hot or a cold shower, holding that ice, listening to very loud music, really like the sensation of sound, squeezing like a rubber ball or something as well. Okay, so next we're going to talk about self-soothing. And self-soothing is doing things that feel pleasant, comforting, and provide relief from stress or pain. It makes it much easier to pass the time without making things worse. So again, it's kind of being like comforting, nurturing, peacemaking, gentle, and mindfully kind to yourself. You want to do self-soothing activities to reduce vulnerability to your emotion mind and to acting impulsively, and then reducing that sense of deprivation that can also often come before feeling vulnerable. So it helps you tolerate pain and distress without making it worse. So how do you self-soothe? So you want to think about all 5 senses when you self-soothe. So vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. So what are some ideas for that? So this is distress tolerance handout 8. So if you think about each of the different senses, so what can you do? So for something like vision, maybe it's like stargazing at night, or creating like a space in your house that's just really visually appealing and really relaxing. Maybe that involves lighting a candle, walking in a pretty part of your town, or going outside and looking at nature, like if it's the fall time, going and looking at beautiful leaves, or if it's the spring, what flowers are blooming. With hearing, listening to soothing or invigorating music. Maybe listening to sounds of nature, whether that's actually going into nature or just listening to them on a CD or online. Making your own mix, right, with technology. So maybe you make a playlist on your phone or your iPod, turning on the radio. With smell, so maybe you go and you find that perfume you really love, like the one you wear for special occasions, and you smell it, or maybe you have a favorite candle. Going outside and smelling the flowers and the roses, literally, you know, you can combine that one with the sight and hearing. Taste. So maybe you eat a bite of your favorite food and you really kind of mindfully eat that and enjoy it and notice notice how it tastes. Sampling something, you know, maybe treating yourself to something you don't usually spend the money on, or you just don't have that often. But a key part of this would be to really mindfully eat it and enjoy it. And then with touch, so maybe you pet your dog or your cat, or you hold your baby, you put lotion on, you wrap yourself up in a blanket or like a really snuggly jacket to comfort yourself. Self-soothing, you can also pair it with problem solving. So to think about self-soothing with problem solving, you want to balance it. So it's especially important during crisis when the sudden demands feel really overwhelming and might keep you from doing what's required. So if that's the case, self-soothing can be like a first step or a bridge to bringing down those negative emotions. However, it's not sufficient for solving crises. So you need to follow it by working on a task and getting it done. Alternatively, you might use one of the tip skills. So maybe you're feeling really overwhelmed and you go through those tip skills we just learned to make yourself feel less overwhelmed. You might follow that with some problem solving, and then you might reward yourself with self-soothing, right? So you can kind of mix up the order. All right, well, thank you all for listening.